This is my week 1 progress of Dot Adventure. And as I said last week, I was going to be focusing on the enemy AI, and that is what I've done. And so I focused on creating controls for the enemies so they can now have advanced movement. They just don't move towards the player to an end distance. They determine their speed based off of an inputted value, and then they have a series of criteria that it goes through as it goes through the states. I think it'll be better to go through the individual states than go over the criteria as I go over it. So enemies start in the idle state. It's where they'll go over like an idle path that they have. Now, if there isn't an idle path, it'll just set its transform to null and it won't move. Or it will have just one spot and stay in that one spot instead of having a path that follows around. But once it detects an enemy, and I think the distance I use is 11, but I might change that later on, it's just how far away the player needs to be for the enemy to aggro. And once it's aggroed, it'll check what its tactic type is. And its tactic is either going to be passive, passive-aggressive, or just aggressive. And if it's passive, it goes straight into the passive state. And if it's a passive-aggressive, it will go into the aggressive state, and then once it's below a certain health, it will enter the passive state. So let's go over the passive state. Not all enemies will have like a passive location if they're not passive or passive-aggressive, but passive enemies have the location they'll retreat to, which will be their safe area, which once they either detect an enemy or their health is so, or once they enter the passive state, they're going to move over and run to their safe space, and they'll stay in the safe space till they detect the player being farther away than their calm distance, which is how far it'll be for a enemy to re-enter being passive or being idle. But say the enemy is aggressive, we'll go down the aggressive path, and that's a lot more complicated. So once it detects it's going to be aggressive, it then it'll move aggressively, in which it will determine what attack type it is, and this will just be, right now it's just a random, if there's multiple attacks, it'll just randomly choose one. But I plan on adding a system that will allow it to be more complicated and have like weights, so certain stuff happens more often than others. So the enemy will go enter aggressive, then it'll be like, okay, I'm going to do this attack. After that, it'll run through, and then it'll have another one and be like, now it's in its second state. It's already chosen it, now it has to move to its attack position. And this is determined by, there's a ring of circles around the player. And so when the enemy has to move to its attack pose, it will find the closest position in a ring. So there's 4 rings: very large, large, middle, and small. So it will choose based off its ring type. So if it's large, it'll find the closest one in the large ring and then move to that position. Then once it's reached its end destination, so it's reached its position in the circle, it'll then enter the attacking phase, in which the enemy's finally allowed to attack. And so I don't have the attacking weapon scripts yet, but there's a little code that's right there, so I just have to add some stuff once I add the enemies, but it'll effectively just activates the enemy script, in which it's like, okay, fire, shoot, and then that will be its attack. But it'll then wait after that to see like how long it has to be until it's done attacking, and then after that it'll go into its idle or retreating fallback phase, whatever you want to call it. It's just its post-attack phase, I think is the terminology I used in the script. But after it's done attacking, it's like, okay, I need to either fall back, circle, or dodge, in which it's just movement patterns the enemy does while it's waiting for it to be able to attack. And then there's just a different attack wait time, and each of the different attacks have a different attack wait time, so not all of them will use the same attack wait time, so certain attacks will allow it to attack faster again, while other ones will take a longer cooldown after its attack. But there's 3 different ones. Fallback, because it just moves the ring behind it unless it's at the very large ring, in which it just won't move backwards and just stay where it is. Dodge makes it so the enemy moves back and forth between 2 of the circle positions. And then circle makes it so the enemy moves around the circle, so it's just circling around the enemy. Now, one of the limitations of the system is each circle is composed of 10 spots, so theoretically you can only have really 10 enemies, or 8 enemies at each ring, and then some of the rings will block it, other enemies from attacking, so theoretically you can really only have 8 enemies attacking. So I might have to add some stuff later on to allow for bigger fights, or I'll just have to make sure I code the enemies with knowledge of that limitation. That's been my progress this week, but next week, finally focused on the actual attacks. Hopefully I'm going to get ranged and melee done, and they're the 2 biggest, and then I'll just have magic done. Thankfully, the other attack type is mixed, in which it uses one of the 3. And because the way the enemy mind, as it's called, script is coded, it's just really easy. I create one attack type and you just add another one if you want to make it mixed. You just add a different melee and you add another one that's ranged. So that one's pretty easy, but hopefully I'll be able to get the enemy or the ranged and melee scripts done, and maybe I'll be able to get the magic one done. But that is my progress for the week 1 of Dot Adventure devlogs.